was very good, but it was not transcendent. It does not deserve the hate train that I've seen other people give it on social media, people claiming it's AI. No, it's not. I think some of you just don't like to see a woman of colour succeed, particularly in a genre like fantasy that is this oversaturated. But for someone like her, who is a superstar, and every time she publishes something, we're expecting 200%, when a book like this is just 150, it's difficult. This feels good, but like something everyday people would write. And she's so beyond that now. The bar was here, and maybe I blame myself a little bit for building it up so much in my mind that the only way to go from here was down. But I do think this is on the weaker side of her book so far. There are plenty of things that I would change. The biggest thing that I would change is making it Cambridge. Why was the school in this book Cambridge? For me, it was so pointless because it wasn't in any way motivated by the history of Cambridge or anything to do with Cambridge. And if you're making this the Cambridge novel, then you can't help but mentally compare it to Babel, which was the Oxford novel. And Babel is so perfect. Its attention to detail, incredible. Like, I truly think that book is a masterpiece. And so when you read this, it feels like it fails on every single metric, but you're making an unfair comparison because even though they're both meant to be academic novels, Babel is far more academic. There's footnotes, there's references. I know people say it reads like a textbook, and maybe you're to blame. Maybe it's your pushback that has meant that this one feels a little dumbed down in comparison, because I was missing that personally. Babel is my favourite book from her. I wanted more of that. This felt more like a sort of YA romantic, almost like a Heroes of Olympus book. You know, it doesn't feel like something she would write. All of her other books up until this point have been so political and so biting in what they have to say. Babel probably perfected that. It so perfectly like critiqued Oxford, the good and the bad. This doesn't really have that. Like, there's some touch and go points about how older male professors can be a bit creepy and gross, but that wasn't enough for me. It needed more of a take. There wasn't enough of a take for me, which is strange because normally in every one of her books, she's so with that. I think the story should have had alternating POVs as well, because we spend pretty much the whole story with Alice and not enough time with Peter. So I felt like I didn't really know Peter, and then I didn't really care about Peter or their relationship because the narrative was so unbalanced. I needed time between the two of them, because when we spend some time with Peter and we learn about how he has Crohn's disease, how it affects his studies, it was one of the high points of the book because it was emotional and it was relatable and it was really well thought of. But it was also like the first time we were actually hearing from Peter. So to get that like 300 plus pages into the book, you're like, oh, where did you come from all of a sudden? I needed a bit of both of them, not just Alice steering the ship. I think my advice, if you're about to start this book, is to go into it without taking into account her other books. Like, if this was your first R.F. Kuang book, you'd probably have a much better time with it than I did, because I couldn't help but compare it to her fantasy books, her other academic novel, and that kind of threw the whole thing into a state of flux, because I'm looking for Babel comparisons when this is clearly a step in a new direction altogether. So I don't know how I'm supposed to perceive this. Maybe that's the problem, but then I also think it could have been more assertive in how it directs us. Like, Babel is so authoritative. I know people don't like that, as if every narrative voice should be like gentle and inviting. I like that Babel sits you down and is like, look, these are the facts. You can believe them if you want, but here is a compelling argument for colonialism and why it's bad. This was a bit too casual. I get it, we're going on a trip through hell, but I need the rules, the world building, the magic system. Everything felt just a bit casual, too casual. The density of flashbacks really bothered me as well, because you couldn't get nicely settled in hell without one of the characters being like, oh, this time that I was in Cambridge and so was rude to me. And it's like, no, I want to be in hell. I've had it with your Cambridge. Especially, these characters are very reminiscent of people in real life who go to Cambridge and make it their whole personality, which, like, the cruel part of me kind of enjoyed, but then it could have been more self-aware and worked that as, like, an angle. Like, I needed more making fun of, like, highbrow academics who take themselves too seriously. This could have been more tongue-in-cheek. I think it was trying to lean into, like, a more earnest love story between Alice and Peter, but I really didn't see it for them, because you didn't get enough Peter and you didn't really get enough of them together. It was just some, like, half-baked dialogue that you probably would have seen in Yellowface. What can make dark academia so compelling as a subgenre is the exclusivity of education, how esoteric these high institutions have become. There's a point where they're in hell and they're talking to these people in the library, and they don't want to be reincarnated because they don't want to run the risk of becoming people who have no access to education. Lean into that. That was one of the most interesting parts of the whole book. All of this talk about, Alice and Peter, they have feelings for each other. Couldn't care less. It should have been more political. We're talking about Cambridge here, like one of the biggest 1%er academies the world has ever seen. Tell me about it. Especially from Kuang, she's someone who has gone to Cambridge and has gone to Oxford and a bunch of other prestigious schools. Like, she's conquering the world, but she's also got this very rare experience, this lived-in experience of what it's like to be in these schools. So it was bizarre to me how alien this book felt. It felt really removed from the subject material, but then it also wasn't that interested in telling the story of hell either. I still adore R.F. Kuang, and I think she's one of the best authors of our time. But on a good day, this is an identity crisis, and on a bad day, it's a clusterfuck. Like, I need you to decide what genre your book is supposed to be and what you're setting out to achieve with it. Because this was like one part fantasy, one part dark academia, one part YA, one part lit fic, one part supernatural horror. And because it has its fingers in so many pies, you don't really get to appreciate any singular pie in this situation, because it's doing a bit too much, is what I would say. Like, I couldn't appreciate hell, I couldn't appreciate Cambridge, the politics, there really wasn't much to hold on to. The characters felt a bit one-dimensional, which is crazy, because in Babel, they feel like real people that you could sit down and have a conversation with. I don't know what to feel yet. And I think that's why so many people are confused on their thoughts with this one. If this is supposed to be an academic novel, then I'm confused as to what the subject is supposed to be. Because even though, yes, I'm aware that magic is made up and fictional, it seemed to be based on, like, philosophy and logic. But then why even talk about going down to hell, because that's so, like, classical. I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of it. The great thing about social media, we all experience and interpret art very differently. I'm sure there'll be people out there who, for them, Katabasis is their number one R.F. Kuang. For me, it's still Babel. I almost feel like this is like a cheap imitation of Babel, to be honest with you. Again, I don't dislike it. It's just, I think true fandom is appreciating when something is not worthy of the artist, and I feel like she's had much higher highs than this. So I am a little disappointed, to be honest, especially waiting, 15 plus months since the announcement of this. I was expecting more. But hey, R.F. Kuang, still love her, and still going to read Taipei's story.